The Dems, the mainstream media, the whole machine is willing to go full-blown crazy on us this year. The border, the Constitution, the candidates, the election, the law, all of it. It's all freaking here. And the best thing we can do is not only supersede them morally with truth and reality, but also match the intensity, match some strategy. Don't just respond to everything. Do some things perhaps outside of the box. So this one is a long shot, but I just want to put it out into the ether. Colin Rugg, an actual journalist, tweeted this. This is sort of an interesting, just game changer idea. Report. A Trump and RFK Jr. 2024 ticket could be a possibility after a new report claims the Trump team reached out to RFK about serving as VP. Wow. Trump operatives expressed an interest in Kennedy early on, but it was all premature, a source said. The pair recently agreed with their support for Texas in the fight against illegal immigration. The source, according to the New York Post, said the gesture was made right out of the box when Bobby announced his run for president. Anything's possible. I wouldn't write it off by any means, the source said. During a recent event on Fox News, Trump suggested that he already knows who his VP pick will be. Now, I just want to just say real quick, I have no, New York Post, anonymous source, all that stuff. So I'm not giving this any extra credence. RFK, by the way, has also said repeatedly that he would never be on the ticket with Donald Trump. But I'm talking about the idea here, not the exact specifics, that whatever is happening in this country has to be solved by some outside the box thinking, has to be solved by some people who actually care about this country. We have to start thinking creatively because otherwise we're just responding to more and more nonsense. If we look at the nonsense of 2 years ago, do we have more nonsense now or less nonsense? I'm fairly certain we have more nonsense. So we need to wake up to some of this. And speaking of wake up, one of the nice things about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is that he's been waking up in real time. You may remember the day he announced he was running for president as a Democrat, I said he would not be a Democrat by the end of this thing. I said, I don't know if he'll be a Republican, but he will not be a Democrat. Well, subsequently, he has left the Democrat Party. He's running as an independent. Now, interestingly, there was another rumor over the weekend that he might run as a libertarian because the libertarians, if you're an independent, you're not on all the ballots. The Libertarian Party is on every single ballot of all 50 states. So if the libertarians were like, all right, he's not the perfect libertarian, he might be a little too big government for us in some ways, but libertarians love all of his COVID stuff, right? So they might be like, you know what, let's put him on the ballot, and then something crazy could happen, because what if he got 20% of the vote? Does that take more from Trump or does it take more from Biden, et cetera, et cetera? But the interesting thing about RFK is that he's waking up in real time. If you listen to him on the border from 10 years ago, it was open borders and all that. And then he went to the border. We played you the clip a while back. I talked to him about it when I interviewed him. And now he has woken up and he is standing by Texas and the other red states in this border battle. Take a look.
What's the state of your ideas around the border and how it's getting kicked around now after all this time?
One is, I think that Governor Abbott is correct in Texas, that Texas has a right to prevent invasion and to take action to prevent invasion of the border. If I were president, I would shut down the border immediately.
And that's quite a statement. Remember, this guy was a Democrat 3 months ago, and here he's talking about being president and shutting down the border. Now, does it sound to you like allowing 5,000 illegal people in a day, on top of the amount of people who can legally come here a day? Again, I said 1.8 million people a year illegally. It doesn't even make sense. Like in its own, like, just if you understand what law is, how is it law? We will sign something into law that will allow X amount of illegal people in. Like, it just makes no sense. So the point is, there is a political alignment with Robert F. Kennedy and Trump. I don't know that they can work it out, but there is something there. And if we can figure out what that thing is, it doesn't mean they have to exactly agree on climate or exactly agree on abortion. But whatever that thing is, that also connects kind of you and me and old school liberals and all of and libertarians and all then there's a real movement, a movement that actually cares about America and is sane and everything else, even if some of the characters are, say, a bit over the top and everything else. We've got a bit more on RFK from the Daily Wire. Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. took nearly a quarter of the vote in a new poll examining a hypothetical three-way matchup in 2024. The results of a Quinnipiac University national poll released on Wednesday showed Kennedy with 22% support among registered voters, behind Joe Biden with 39% and former President Donald Trump with 36%, nearly 1 year away from the general election. I mean, that is super interesting. right? What you're seeing there is he's not that far off from the big boys, but even if he doesn't become president, like even if he doesn't get to that 34% threshold and is able to beat the two of them, which way can he push the election? Like he actually could now. There is something interesting happening. So electorally, the two of them, be it Trump and RFK, or he's certainly not going to do anything with Biden, but Trump and RFK paired together would be a bipartisan superpower that I think could actually win over the country and get rid of Biden and the progressive lunatics. I want to read one other tweet from my friend and former Rubin Report guest, many, at least 10-time guest, Brett Weinstein, who I think said something that really sums up the RFK situation quite nicely. To me, this is clear. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is the best shot we have to pull the country and the West out of this nosedive. I see 3 reasons for RFK Jr. rather than Trump is the right man for the job. The first is time. Trump is old and would have only 4 years to get us turned around. The second is temperament. Trump is politically brilliant, but not a meticulous thinker. He is also impulsive and driven by ego. That makes him manipulable. The fact that he still thinks his COVID record is impressive is a major red flag. He was played by Fauci, etc., and still doesn't see it. Bobby, by contrast, is a very deep thinker, as well as mentally disciplined and unflappable. The third is teamwork. Trump is a one-man show, and the job that needs doing isn't a job for one man. With all that said, the number one objective for all patriotic Americans in this election must be to remove the diabolical ruling cabal from power. Trump is far better than the blue team circus that currently holds the White House. If, as the election approaches, Trump is the best chance we have to remove Biden and the DNC from power, then I will vote accordingly. I would urge you to do the same. I really can't emphasize enough that Brett saying this, look, you may be watching this completely on Team Trump right now. You might be watching this as someone who's deeply supported DeSantis, and you're like, no, we've got to go Trump now. RFK is a distraction. The idea of Brett Weinstein, lifelong Democrat, ultimately turned independent, but he was a progressive working at Evergreen State University, which was the most progressive college in the United States, that he is now basically saying, I will vote for Trump because these people are effing bananas, but maybe there is a better way, which could incorporate RFK into it. I'm just telling you guys, with 10 months out from this thing, like anything can happen. Doesn't it feel like you can feel it? You don't need me to tell it to you. The Biden thing feels completely up in the air right now, whether it's going to be Biden or Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama or Big Mike or whoever it's going to be. Like you just know it, right? And now the Republican thing's starting to feel that way. And now there's this independent thing, or does he come in as a libertarian, et cetera, et cetera. So we need a new wild card to get out of this nonsense, right? And one way we get out of this nonsense is waking more people up, getting people to not buy the nonsense from CNN and MSNBC and the rest of the legacy media. That would go a long way, because if we could wake up more people now, then we got time before we get to that election. Here's one more from RFK talking about the mainstream media landscape and how we need a shift, because that will actually cause ultimately voting habits to be different.
The one cohort that I'm doing really poorly with is baby boomers. And I ought to be doing, thank you. Thanks to all the old people like me. And I ought to be doing really great with them, because, they're the people who remember Camelot and the Kennedy era. But, they have a disability, which is they only get their news from ABC, NBC, CNN, MSNBC, and the New York Times. And if I were living in that information ecosystem, I'd have a low opinion of myself as well. What we're finding is if they, the young people are getting their information from long-form interviews, from podcasts, from other alternative interviews. So they're doing critical thinking, and they're not locked into these orthodoxies. And somehow, if you're young and you have parents, you need to lock them up somewhere and make them listen to a Joe Rogan podcast.
All right, so do you get it? I'm not telling you he has all the answers. You guys know I disagreed with him on this show about the affirmative action decision. And actually, by the end, I kind of got him to come around to my position a little bit more. He is definitely more into the climate stuff than I am into, or at least believing that humans can do something about it. There are probably a series of other disagreements that we have. But does the guy love America? Yes. Does he see the problem with the mainstream media? Yes. Does he want accountability as it relates to COVID, yes. And there are a series of other things that make sense with this guy. So I don't know where he fits into the ecosystem. And that really wasn't the genesis of the whole show. The genesis of the whole show is that there are more of us waking up, and we've got to figure out how to wrangle some cats right now into a movement, because who knows what happens. You might be on the Trump train and you do not know if all these cases, removing him, maybe it just doesn't work out. Maybe he doesn't get on the ballots. Like, who the high hell knows? So we better start thinking about things a little more holistically, or it's going to roll around to early January 2025, and it could be far worse than Joe Biden. It could